Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Recording this episode here in Lexington, Kentucky before heading back home. So, in a hotel room here. Sorry for the little bit worse lighting than I have in my home setup, but we still wanted to get today's episode out because obviously Champ Week is here. March Madness is right around the corner, and we have a lot to talk about when it comes to college basketball. And that's why you are obviously tuned in to this show. Again, thank you for listening and joining us here for All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. Leave a like on the video, comment. You can certainly join in on the chat. Ask any questions you may have regarding the topics I'm going to cover today, but also any other questions you have about Champ Week, about March Madness coming up, Selection Sunday. All that good stuff is certainly on the table for today's episode. So please join in on the chat. Also, make sure you are following the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast. Where every Monday and Friday we have new episodes up on Spotify or wherever you do listen to the podcast feed. And then also make sure you are following me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. That's where I promote this YouTube show, the podcast, my written work on KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. All that good stuff lives on my Twitter account. Again, that's at BRamseyKSR. So give me a follow there as well so you don't miss any of the content. And obviously the content is rolling faster and deeper than ever this time of year. Again, we are right in the smack middle of Champ Week. The major conference tournaments get underway today on Wednesday as you're listening to this. We get a few more conference championship games later this evening. We've already punched 11 tickets to the big dance to this point. So a lot is happening, and it's all happening in a hurry between now and Selection Sunday, which is officially just around the corner. So off the top here, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the 11 teams that have already punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament, having won the automatic bid in their respective conference tournaments. In the Atlantic Sun, Stetson won their conference tournament. In the CAA, you had Charleston. That was last night. Coach Pat Kelsey got it done with Charleston. Coach Greg Campy, 40 years at Oakland. They won the Horizon League last night as well. Coach Campy, a very small connection to him. He was a Defiance High School graduate. I coached for a couple years at Defiance College. The year before I went to Defiance, the guys actually went up and played an exhibition game against Coach Campy and the Grizzlies. His resume is unlike anybody's in college basketball. And it's interesting, literally his entire life he spent in Southeast Michigan or Northwest Ohio. Essentially went to Defiance High School in Northwest Ohio, went and played basketball and football actually at Bowling Green, also in Northwest Ohio, was an assistant for 6 years at Toledo, Northwest Ohio, and then starting in 1984 until now has been the head coach at Oakland. So he's had two jobs, one assistant coaching job, one head coaching job in his career. Again, the Horizon League went to Oakland. In a game that pretty much all of us watched on Sunday, Arch Madness, the Missouri Valley tournament, went to Drake, beating Indiana State. Hopefully the Sycamores can still get into the NCAA tournament. Another game that was played last night in the Northeast Conference, number 6 seed in that tournament, Wagner, pulled off the upset against Merrimack. Hated to see Coach Gallo's group go down. If you remember from last season, Merrimack actually won the NEC tournament, but it was the 4th year of their transition, their probationary period from Division II to Division I, so they weren't allowed to go. This year, they make it back to the championship game when they actually are allowed to go to the NCAA tournament, but couldn't get it done. In the OVC, Morehead State won that conference. In the SoCon, Samford won it all. They have 29 wins this year. Going to be a very dangerous 13 seed probably in the NCAA tournament. Summit League, the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State won that league. Also last night, St. Mary's beat Gonzaga. In the best championship game certainly that we've seen so far, or at least best in terms of having two really good teams, top 25 caliber teams playing. St. Mary's beat Gonzaga. I think it was like 69-60. A little bit of an ugly game, but the Gales got it done. I think it was the first time, if I remember correctly, the first time since maybe 2002, something like that, that St. Mary's won both the regular season outright and the West Coast Conference tournament. And then in the Sun Belt, James Madison won that. They're going to be that's a 31-win team, a team that certainly can that's going to be a popular upset pick as a 12, probably maybe 13 seed, whatever they end up being in the NCAA tournament. Then in the Big South, UNC Asheville won that league. So those are the 11 teams that have already locked themselves into the NCAA tournament. They are not sweating out champ week and what's happening between now and the NCAA tournament. They already know they are playing, and they don't even have anything to prepare for, really, because obviously they don't know who they're playing. So they get a little bit of time just to focus on themselves. Obviously get into the film room to break down some things that they want to be able to do in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, they're still practicing and all that, but maybe a little bit more relaxed atmosphere as they're awaiting their fate on Selection Sunday. This evening, Wednesday night, 3 more conference championship games that will be played, with 3 more tickets obviously being punched to the big dance. In the Big Sky out west, we have Montana against Montana State. In that matchup, in the Patriot League, Colgate is playing Lehigh, and in the Southland, you have McNeese State, led by head coach Will Wade, taking on Nichols. So 3 more tournaments. And then you also have a championship game already set for the American East, though they're not playing until Saturday. That matchup is Vermont against UMass Lowell. The American East went chalk this year. Those are the number 1 and number 2 seed. Catamounts certainly no stranger to postseason success. So that's sort of your update where we stand right now with Champ Week. The ACC and the Big 12 both got underway yesterday on Tuesday afternoon. Today, the rest of the major conference tournaments will tip off with the Big East, the Big 10, the SEC, Mountain West is going to get going today as well, the Pac-12. So a lot of higher level basketball is going to start being played. But honestly, at this point, like the early round games in these major conference tournaments aren't nearly as interesting or fun to watch as the semifinals, championship games of some of the lower level conferences. And as I already outlined, we're going to get more of those matchups still this evening as well. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today was just sort of take a deep dive into the Southeastern Conference Tournament. Typically, I'm in Nashville for the SEC tournament this time of year, but did not make the trip this year. Going to stay home and enjoy it without dealing with the insanity that is Nashville on SEC tournament weekend. But looking forward to some first round and second round games in Indianapolis. There'll be some relatively local to me Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games in Detroit. So certainly we'll most likely be watching in person some postseason basketball at some point over the next few weeks. But obviously being a Kentucky fan, writing for KentuckySportsRadio.com, I just have a little bit stronger connection to the Southeastern Conference. So that is why we are going to take more of a deep dive into that league. That tips off at 7 p.m. this evening, again, recording this live on Wednesday afternoon. In the first game at 7 o'clock, you get number 12 seed Arkansas against number 13 seed Vanderbilt. 2 teams that, well, I guess I'll say it this way. Obviously, Arkansas has been a major disappointment. They were picked preseason number 3, I believe, in the SEC, finished 12th. Just has not gone well for Coach Musselman this year. The pieces didn't seem to fit together. There was a lot of kind of tumultuous stuff, it seemed like, going on behind the scenes as well, with guys leaving the program or missing a lot of games, different things that happened throughout the season. But they've actually played sneakily decent down the stretch here. They did lose to Vanderbilt just a couple weeks ago, but even with that, they still went 3-3 down the stretch. Played Kentucky down to the wire at Rupp Arena, took Alabama to overtime in Tuscaloosa in the last regular season game of the year, in a game that the Razorbacks absolutely should have won. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think they could make a run and win the SEC. It doesn't really seem like they have that in them. But could this team win a couple games and make a little bit of noise in Nashville this year? I absolutely so. I mean, I still think that this is they're not talented like we expected them to be before the year when they were picked 3rd, but I think they're more talented than 12th also, and we've actually seen that a little bit over the last couple of weeks. And then Vanderbilt, they had a disappointing year, not necessarily based on expectations, but just on what they had built last year. Coach Stackhouse gets SEC Coach of the Year. They win 21 or 22 games, relatively narrowly missed the NCAA tournament, are above 500 in the SEC for the first time in quite a while. And then despite getting some of that positive momentum, has come crashing back down this year, go 4-14 in the league. They still have some talented guards that give them a chance in any given game. Ezra Manjan and Tyron Lawrence are good guards. I think you can actually see this game get up and down a little bit tonight in Nashville, but I do think Arkansas will win this opening round matchup. And then the game to follow, that first one, is number 11 seed Georgia against number 14 seed Missouri, who still has not won an SEC game. They finished their regular season 0-18. Georgia has not played very well of late either. I believe, what was it? They've lost like 7 of their last 9. It might even be worse than that. I think they've actually lost maybe 9 of their last 11 or 11 of the last 13. Like it has not gone well for Coach Mike White over the last couple of months in Athens. But at the end of the day, it's hard to imagine that Missouri has much interest in being in Nashville right now. So I think it'll probably be a pretty quick trip for them. They're going to turn around and head back to Columbia after a loss this evening. So that will advance those two teams. And to start the full day in Nashville off on Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, you get the 8 seed LSU Tigers against the 9 seed Mississippi State Bulldogs. Mississippi State had a disappointing end to the regular season. I think they lost 4 straight after having won 5 straight before that. LSU trending a little bit in the other direction. They played pretty darn well, winning several games down the stretch there. I think they have won 5 of their last 7 games entering the SEC tournament, including that win over Kentucky at the buzzer. Obviously also won at South Carolina in kind of a crazy finish as well during that stretch. So Coach McMahon has righted the ship a little bit after a tough start to the season. But I think the Mississippi State team is just better. Again, they had a tough finish to the year, but were pretty hot before that. Josh Hubbard, the freshman, has already made 98 threes this season. I think you'll see him get to 100 tonight. Tolu Smith was a first-team All-SEC selection this season as well, and he's back and healthy and in the full swing of things. So I think with what the Bulldogs can do defensively, and then with the firepower of Josh Hubbard, with kind of the consistency of Tolu Smith around the basket, I think you'll see the Bulldogs advance. In the second game tomorrow, you have 5 seed South Carolina against who I picked, the 12 seed Arkansas. Obviously, Coach Lamont Paris, SEC Coach of the Year this season. They were picked last, ended up finishing 5th, but really in a tie for second place in the league at 13-5. There, I think they're ranked 15th in the country right now. He's going to have a chance to be National Coach of the Year as well. Michi Johnson, Talon Cooper, those guys became all SEC caliber guards this year, and it was why I was high on the Gamecocks going in. I just thought they were good enough guards to win a lot of games. Now I thought they might be more around 500 than 13-5, admittedly, but once again, it's credit to Coach Paris. They've just continued to win games, and I think they will win this first round matchup against Arkansas as well. Then in the evening session on Thursday, you get 7 seed Texas A&M, 10 seed Ole Miss. Ole Miss has just come crashing down at the end of the season under I'm drawing a complete blank here under Coach Chris Beard. Sorry, I was searching for their name to click them on KenPom and lost my train of thought there for a second. But they finished the year 20-11 after starting 13-0. They've lost 8 of their last 10 games entering the SEC tournament, whereas Texas A&M has turned it on a little bit. They had lost 5 straight, but now they've won 3 straight entering the SEC tournament. They had just won in Oxford 86-60, and now they're going to turn around and play the Rebels again. But it's so hard to know what to make of this Aggies team. When Tyrese Radford, when Wade Taylor IV are playing well, this team is as good as anybody in the league. And we've seen they're top 50 both in KenPom adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency. They beat Kentucky. They beat Tennessee. They went and beat Mississippi State late in the season as well. So they've beaten Florida. So they've beaten some of the better teams in the league this season, including the top 2 teams. Again, they beat Tennessee, beat Kentucky this year, but they're just so inconsistent because so much of it depends on can their otherwise relatively inept, inefficient offense, can they get something out of Radford and Wade Taylor IV? When those guys are on, they can beat anybody. When they're not playing as great, then they're the reason they lose, honestly, because they shoot them out of games. Now, this time of year, can that win them a game or 2? Yes. Can it win them 4 straight? Probably not. They are smack dab on the bubble, which to me seems odd, but I don't know how they're even considered really for the NCAA tournament at 18-13 and 9-9 in the SEC. But they've at least played their way again with some of those that they have. I think 5 quad one wins, a couple of really quality wins here in the SEC. They certainly need one win. Then they would probably play Kentucky, or they would play Kentucky on Friday. If they win that one, I would say they're in, but they got to get there first. I do think they will beat Ole Miss just because Ole Miss has been trending in the wrong direction. And then the nightcap on Thursday will be 6 seed Florida against 11 seed Georgia. To me, Florida is the most dangerous team, or one of the most dangerous teams in this SEC tournament. And they're like plus 1,600 to win the thing. I really like the value on that. With Walter Clayton Jr., Zion Pullen, they have the guard play and the offensive firepower to beat anybody in this tournament. We've seen that. Obviously, they've beaten Kentucky. They've beaten Alabama this year. And with what they can do offensively, they are so talented. Their ceiling is so high that they can really go out and beat some people. And I do think they'll easily take care of business against Georgia. That'll give us a quarterfinals on Friday, Tennessee and Mississippi State. I still think Tennessee is the best team in the SEC. Obviously, they won the league outright in the regular season, though they lost that last game in Knoxville to Kentucky. I think Tennessee will take care of business here. Dalton Connect, first-team All-American, SEC Player of the Year. Those sort of awards have started to come out this week. Then I have number 4 seed Auburn playing 5 seed South Carolina. I continue to think this Auburn team's really dangerous. Their guard play still concerns me a little bit. When Aiden Holloway's playing really well, I think when Denver Jones is playing well, they're honestly as good as anybody in the country because of their offensive balance with what they can do inside with Broome and Jalen Williams. And to me, John A. Broome is the defense player of the year in the SEC as well. Zakai Ziegler has been winning those awards, but I would have voted for Broome. Splitting hairs, interior defense, perimeter defense is generally going to win that battle, I guess. But I think that what Broome can do on both sides of the ball around the basket is really valuable. South Carolina won't necessarily have a matchup for that as an undersized team. I think Jalen Williams, Johnny Broome, those guys can advance Auburn on. And then I have Kentucky playing Texas A&M. To me, this Wildcats team is going to be out for revenge, and that one after losing in College Station 97-92 in overtime. Wildcats are playing as well as anybody in the country over the last couple of weeks. They've won 4 straight heading into Champ Week in the SEC tournament here. I think they would advance on. And then Alabama, Florida, take the over. This one, is going to be another shootout as we've seen between these teams already this season. I'm actually going to take Florida in the upset here. I think that we're seeing a little bit of a regression to the mean for Coach Nate Oates and Alabama. Of late, they've lost maybe 3 of their last 5 entering the SEC tournament here now, and I think you can continue to see that against a Florida team that can score with them every step of the way. And I think Florida is actually a little bit better defensively. That's not saying much, but they're better defensively than Alabama. And I think that in some ways they might literally just be a better basketball team this season than Alabama. And nobody would have necessarily expected that a handful of weeks ago, but I just think it's true. I really like Coach Todd Golden's squad, and I'll have the Gators advancing to the SEC semifinals. That'll leave us with Tennessee and Auburn. Again, I just think Tennessee is the best team in the SEC. They will advance here. Kentucky, Florida, rubber match. These teams actually won on each other's home court. So now we get a nice neutral game to round out the 3-game series. And I will take the Wildcats to get this one done for a lot of the same reasons that I picked Florida against Alabama. I think that Kentucky obviously has the firepower to play with anyone, but certainly keep up with the Gators. Now, guarding those guards is tough, but it's tough to guard the Cats guards as well. And I think that at the end of the day, what Kentucky can do around the rim with their rim protection, Ugonna Onyenso has played great the last couple of games. Just as I think Florida is a little bit better defensively than Alabama, I think Kentucky is a little bit better defensively than Florida, and that would be the difference to get those stretches of stops that are so important for this Kentucky team for them to advance. So I guess we'll end up having chalk here in the SEC tournament. 1 seed Tennessee against 2 seed Kentucky on Sunday for the championship. A lot of people will say this game isn't going to matter for seeding purposes because the NCAA tournament or the NCAA selection committee will have already made their selections. That may or may not be true. To me, it doesn't really matter either way. I think if Kentucky gets there, they will be pretty much locked into a 3 seed. I think if Tennessee gets there, they're probably in line to get the 1 seed, battling with North Carolina and a little bit of Arizona maybe still as well for that 4th and final number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Probably an outside chance that Kentucky moves to 2, but I just don't see that. I mean, obviously Kentucky fans are kind of hyping that up on Twitter. I personally don't really see that happening, But anything can happen. We've certainly seen plenty of losses around college basketball this season. So if Kentucky can win the whole stinking thing, and some team, Creighton, Iowa State, some of these teams lose early in their conference tournaments, then sure, anything can happen. But I actually think Tennessee will get some revenge on what just happened in Knoxville, and when they move to Nashville, I think Tennessee will be your 2024 SEC tournament champions. And then obviously at that point, we'll have a bracket in front of us on Sunday night, and we'll get to start picking all of those games. We will be back a week from now, and we will run through the NCAA tournament bracket on next week's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Obviously, that'll be perfect timing as Tuesday night the play-in games will have happened, and so we'll know the exact bracket, and it'll be the day before the games actually tip off on Thursday. So thank you all so much for tuning in to today's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel, which is where you're watching this. Leave this video a like, leave a comment. If you're watching this in the future, drop a comment or find me on Twitter and ask any questions you may have about Champ Week, Selection Sunday, NCAA Tournament, all that good stuff. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Also find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast. Those episodes go up every Monday and Friday morning, which we'll have plenty of great content, obviously, over the next several weeks of March Madness. And then most importantly, find me on Twitter and give me a follow at BRamseyKSR. That's where you can catch all of my content throughout March Madness and beyond. Again, thank you for tuning in to today's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey, and I look forward to talking next week when we have a bracket. But enjoy the rest of Champ Week, enjoy Selection Sunday, and we will talk next week as the NCAA tournament gets underway. Thanks.